There is a zone in upstate New York where the air tastes like rust, where everything is a little too muggy, too quiet, too close. Trees grow taller there, by reason of not the earth, but the quiet. Time runs skew. Compass needles tremble. GPS signals skip and die. The people will blame it on old wiring, crummy towers, thick cloud cover. They don't think that, but they talk about it anyway. Back in Coldwater, nobody leaves their front porches illuminated past midnight. The electricity goes out from time to time, especially when the fog rolls in low. On such nights, some old-timers gather in the shadows by the dead gas station whose gas pump has been inoperable since the late 90s. They don't talk much, and when they do talk, voices are kept at a murmur. Occasionally, a grizzled old doctor will sit with them, silent, motionless, gazing at the tree line as though memorizing something for the doctor. Dr. Sha Brener came to Coldwater over 30 years ago, but was never meant to stick around. A government man at the time, sent out by the National Health Corps, reassigned wherever medicine was in greatest demand. Towns with no hospitals, towns where roads were a theory, hardly fact, where villages melted like bruises. He ended up there, Marrow Creek, West Virginia. A name little uttered in state histories, swallowed up in folds of forest where the light never quite touched the earth. What constituted homes were nothing but ruins, a crumpled clinic, a wire with current when it wanted, no sheriff, no store. Just the type of place where folks still looked over shoulders at dusk. He was young when he arrived, idealistic, shaved, just out from under student debt and a city internship, and still believed he could make a difference where he went. He had medical supplies in a duffel, a set of clothes, and a dog-eared volume of Whitman he never finished. Things fell into a routine for a while. Days made up of coughs, broken bones, labor pains, wounds bleeding too long. Nights made up of journaling and heavy sleep. The people in the town never said much, but they were civil, on time, respectful in a strange way. Meals would show up at his doorstep unexplained. Fires were cut and stacked. No one would show up asking for anything after nightfall. He never once glimpsed children outdoors. The forest crept up nearby. The trees appeared, not watched, but listening. Like walls, not wilderness. Everyone in Marrow Creek avoided a patch of woods. Never said the name aloud, but it always hung in the background behind the chatter. Coldwater pines, never pointed at, just waved at. Paths were rerouted in order to skip over it. No dogs went into the corner. He never intended to test it, not until something compelled him to. Weather shifted in October, the kind of shift that creeps into joints before the forecaster realizes. The hue of the sky was the color of aged bruises. The wind shrieked at the eaves as though it had been waiting patiently. He closed the clinic up early that night. He had a sandwich, spent time with a book he did not read. Sleep was rapid, heavy, deep. At some time after midnight, he awoke sensing that something had arrived. It was not a sound. Well, not exactly. More a presence on the door, as if pressure through the boards, as if his name was being summoned in stillness, in urgency, from the outside. He dressed in a daze, picked up his coat and his flashlight, and headed out into the chill. The night was darker than it should have been. Fog was curled low, air was sharp, the sky was closed up by clouds, but something in front of him was in motion. Not out of control, not threateningly, just intentionally. He followed. He had not remembered making the decision. No more than that his legs went, and the way cleared. Coldwater Pines did not welcome. It consumed. Trees formed a corridor, impossibly straight, unnaturally compact. The air shifted with every step, colder, heavier, wrong. Silence. Not even the sound of his own breathing felt true. And then the flicker of movement ahead. Shapes in the fog. At first, they appeared to be shadows from the mind, but they weren't. Two men emerged from the shadows. Not spirits, not hallucinations. Real, human, armed. One had a rusty bat, the other something heavy, maybe a crowbar. They gawked at him like a deer at a road flare. Confused, thrilled, more than a little overconfident. They said something. He could not quite recollect. He lifted his hands, showed the medical bag. But the forest had altered behind him. Something changed. The temperature dropped 10 degrees in 2 breaths. The flashlight got dimmer. Static climbed up his back, and in that moment, everything was different. They remained motionless. Then spun. Not to threaten, not to fight. They ran, speechless, sickly, vanished in a flash. He never saw where they went. He never heard them go. Nothing but silence, closing behind them like a gate. The path continued on despite him wishing for it. His body was acting on instinct now. Whatever had been leading him had not finished. The house appeared just around a bend, glowing softly through the trees. The room was dense with illness. Sweats clung in fog to the corners. A woman was sweating, raving, in and out. Another individual, a man, older, unresponsive, sat beside her, motionless. He acted on instinct. No words, movement, water, cloth, pulse, breath, compress. The fever had broken by morning. A picture was on the floor, face down in the room. He turned it over carelessly. He recognized the face. He had seen it in the forest minutes ago. Hours, days, impossible. And in some way, it was not. The details returned in slow motion. A man soaked in the rain, leading him there in complete silence. A figure making no sound. A presence knowing the way by itself. The face in the picture was the same, but older, faded, edged in black ribbon. He set out from home at first light. The way back was lost. No path, no clearing, no structure, just trees, ancient, watching. He could not remember the way back. Only he was once more at the creek bank, at the head of Marrow Creek, frozen over, the light gone dead in his hand. The home he awoke in was not quite right. The walls were not right. The silence was too still. He spent another 3 weeks in Marrow Creek, then left in silence, wordlessly. He never re-employed with the health corps. He sits beneath the dead oak in Coldwater now and watches the fog. Sometimes, when the night is icy cold and the wind stirs reminiscently, he will feel the pull in his chest. Not injured, something old. The sensation of a still open door in some place in the woods. A road still unfinished with him. He has not returned. Rain poured over the quiet town of Elorn Valley like a slow, steady drumbeat. The sky had turned a deep steel gray, and the wind curled through the trees like a whisper no one wanted to hear. At the edge of town, a small coffee shack stood, warm inside but hollow that night. Two men sat at the counter, Joe and Marty, both locals, both usually quick with a joke or story. But this evening, their faces were drawn and tired. Their coffee sat untouched. The usual rhythm of laughter and chatter had vanished, replaced by silence and long, worried stares at the storm outside. Elorn Valley had always been a tight-knit town. When something needed doing, people came together. That's exactly what they had done to build a small clinic. For years, they saved every spare dollar, ran charity drives, and even gave up comforts to see it through. Finally, they had the building, walls, roof, plumbing, but no beds, no equipment. The money had run out right before the finish line. The realization had sunk in that week, and it hit hard. After all that effort, the place still couldn't serve a single patient. Joe and Marty weren't just worried, they were heartbroken. Later that evening, the school headmaster, Caleb Wright, learned about the situation. He was close to retirement, respected by all, and known for being calm in a crisis. When he heard the news, he quietly made a decision. Years ago, he had inherited a piece of land in Clearwater, a small place outside town. It had been in his family for generations, but he hadn't used it for anything in years. If he sold it now, he might just raise enough money to buy the missing hospital beds. The next morning, with dark clouds still rolling in, Caleb, Joe, and Marty boarded the train to Clearwater. The rain hadn't let up. Water streaked down the windows and flooded the tracks. Trees along the route bent with the wind, and the world looked grayer by the mile. When they arrived, the town was half hidden in fog and silence. The train station was empty. The streets were flooded and quiet. No taxis, no people, just the sound of water and wind. They had planned to walk to the river, cross it by boat, and reach the land Caleb wanted to sell. As they made their way through the muddy roads, headlights cut through the fog. An old van approached, driven by an older man who somehow looked familiar. Without a word, he pulled over and motioned for them to get in. Grateful, they accepted the ride. The van creaked along through forested paths and open fields, heading toward the river. The driver stayed quiet, offering only the occasional glance through the rearview mirror. Something about him felt a little off, not threatening, but not quite grounded either, like he belonged to a different time. When they reached the riverbank, the current was rough and high. No ferrymen in sight. The boats rocked against their ropes. It was late, and no one was working the docks in that weather. They were stuck. Just then, the driver pointed to a house not far from the river's edge. It was small, old, and weathered by years of storms. He motioned again, for them to stay there for the night. Inside, the house smelled of damp wood and dust. The floorboards were soft with moisture. It looked like no one had lived there in years. A broken window let in the wind, and rain had found its way into corners of the room, but it was shelter. They accepted it. The driver left, saying he'd sleep in the van. The three men laid out mats on the floor and tried to rest. But deep into the night, Caleb woke. Something had stirred him. A faint sound, soft at first, then sharper. It was coming from outside, digging. He crept to the window and peered out. Under the old oak tree in the backyard, the van driver was on his knees, hands in the soil, digging with slow, deliberate movements. The sight struck Caleb with a chill. He woke Joe and Marty, and they stepped outside to investigate. The soil beneath the tree was freshly turned. Something metal glinted beneath the surface. They dug carefully, brushing aside wet earth. Inside a rusted container, they found stacks of cash, old but dry and intact. Enough money to fund the entire clinic. The discovery was overwhelming. None of them spoke. The air felt heavy, like it was waiting for something. Then the wind shifted. The branches above them creaked loudly, and when they looked up, a figure sat in the tree, tall, pale, hollow-eyed. It was the driver, but not the man they'd seen hours earlier. This figure glowed faintly. His limbs seemed too long, his presence too still. He didn't speak, but his message came through with clarity. He had died a year earlier in an accident not far from that very spot. His savings had been buried beneath that tree. Never claimed, never spent. He had remained in the world, restless, waiting for someone who still cared. He had watched Caleb, heard about the town's clinic, seen the decision to sell a piece of history for the good of others. That had been enough. Now, his purpose was done. He vanished as suddenly as he had appeared, fading into the mist. The men stood in silence, clutching the container of bills, their minds racing to keep up with what they had just seen. The night had been long, wet, and strange, but something sacred had happened under that tree. The next morning, they returned to Elorn Valley with the funds. No one else ever knew where the money came from. The beds were bought, the equipment installed, and the clinic opened within weeks. It served its first patient the very next month. The town never knew about the ghostly guide who had helped them from beyond the grave. But Caleb, Joe, and Marty remembered. Every time it rained and the wind howled down the valley, they remembered the house by the river, the man in the tree, the buried kindness, and they never doubted again that even in the darkest night, sometimes the light finds a way back.
There's a place in Oregon that locals never talk about, a forgotten town, Willow Creek, swallowed by forest and silence. They say the river there still carries the cries of those who vanished, and it all began with a doll. The year was 1989. A young woman named Emma Collins had just moved into a small wooden house by the creek, far from the noise of the city, far from anyone who could hear her scream. She worked at Holloway's Antiques, a shop where time itself seemed afraid to move. Dust hung thick in the air like memories refusing to die. One gray afternoon, a delivery arrived, a single, unmarked crate. Inside, buried in old straw and ash, was a porcelain doll, its eyes silver, its smile faint but wrong. The tag around its neck read only 2 words, Willow Doll. Emma couldn't resist. She asked to keep it for herself. That night, she placed the doll on her bedroom shelf, right next to her bed. But Buddy didn't like it. The moment he saw the doll, he started barking and growling, his fur standing straight up. Emma laughed it off. "It's just a toy, Buddy," she said. But Buddy wouldn't sleep in the same room that night. Around 2 a.m., Emma woke up to a faint tapping sound. She looked around, nothing. Then she noticed something strange. The doll that had been sitting upright was now turned toward her bed. She tried to laugh it off again and went back to sleep. But in her dream, she saw a little girl standing in the corner of her room, with silver hair, hollow eyes, and that same faint smile. When Emma woke up, the doll was lying right beside her pillow. Over the next few days, things got worse. She started feeling angry for no reason. She snapped at customers. And a boss, a kind old man, finally fired her after she screamed at him in front of everyone. At home, mirrors began cracking on their own. Buddy stopped eating. And every night, that same tapping sound returned, always closer. On the 7th night, the storm came. Rain lashed against the windows. Lightning flickered across the room. At exactly 3 a.m., the power went out. In the darkness, Emma heard the tapping again. Closer, louder, faster. She couldn't see, only feel. Something cold pressed against her throat. And then a whisper, breathless, wordless, right by her ear. When the lights returned, the doll was on her chest, its head tilted, its glass eyes cracked, but smiling wider than before. She screamed. Buddy ran in, barking wildly. He grabbed the doll in his mouth and tore it apart, porcelain pieces flying everywhere. Emma, shaking and crying, threw the broken doll into the fireplace and watched it burn. The flames flickered, almost forming a human face before it turned to ash. When Emma woke, her skin was covered in tiny red bite marks, like something had crawled all over her at night. Buddy was nowhere. She searched the house, yard, and street. Nothing. Her panic grew. She went back inside, hoping he had just hidden somewhere. But when she entered the bathroom, she screamed. Buddy was lying in the tub, injured, like something had clawed him. Next to him, sitting perfectly upright, was the same doll. Fully intact, not torn, not burned, not damaged. Its grin was now monstrous. Its glass eyes had turned blood red. Emma collapsed in tears. Desperate, she searched online for information about the doll. She found decades-old articles about a factory accident in 1956. A child had gone missing near river, and soon after, the doll line was discontinued. Locals believed the spirit of that child, twisted by rage, had been trapped inside the prototype doll. Collectors who found the original dolls reported losing pets, jobs, even family members. Some claimed the doll feeds on emotional attachment. The more you love it, the stronger it grows. Emma decided to destroy it permanently. She drove to Clearwater Bridge, a cold riverbed miles from town. She set the doll on fire and watched it turn to ash, or at least she thought she did. She poured the ashes into the river and left. That night, she called her younger brother and told him everything. She finally felt safe, but safety didn't last. The next morning, neighbors called the police. Emma's body was found inside her bedroom. Her eyes were wide open, her body rigid, her skin marked with deep scratch lines, and right beside her sat the doll, perfectly clean, perfectly smiling, as if nothing had ever happened. They buried Emma in Willow Creek Cemetery. But 2 nights later, her grave was found open, the coffin empty. And at the foot of the old toy shop's door sat the same silver-haired doll. Locals say the Willow doll was originally owned by a girl who drowned in that same river over a century ago. Every few decades, it finds a new owner, and every time, someone dies. So, if you ever drive through Oregon and find yourself near Willow Creek, and you see a doll by the roadside, silver eyes, cracked smile, don't stop, don't look at it, and whatever you do, don't blink.
Ethan Parker wasn't afraid of the dark. He'd spent most of his 35 years inside the cab of a truck, crossing lonely highways most people avoided. The road was where he belonged. Humming engine, flickering dash light, silence stretching for miles. Out there, time didn't matter, people didn't matter, just miles and asphalt. That night, he was hauling freight from Mobile, Alabama toward the Florida coast, a route he'd never taken before. The locals at the gas station had warned him not to take the old coastal highway after midnight, said it had a way of losing people. Ethan only smiled, thinking they were superstitious. For the first few hours, it was an easy drive. The road twisted through woods thick enough to block out the stars. The moon glowed weakly through drifting clouds. The smell of salt hung in the air, faint but sharp. The ocean couldn't be far. Then, sometime after midnight, something changed. The air grew colder, not gradually, but all at once, like the warmth had been sucked out of the world. Fog began to seep across the road, slow and deliberate, curling up from the ground like smoke from something burning underground. At first, Ethan thought it was just weather, but it didn't behave like fog. It rolled and pulsed, almost as if it were breathing. Within minutes, it swallowed everything. The world outside his headlights vanished. The yellow lines faded, then disappeared. The road beneath him felt wrong, like he wasn't driving on asphalt anymore, but on something softer, shifting faintly under the tires. He slowed down. The silence was suffocating. No crickets, no wind, not even the low growl of the engine seemed real anymore. Then he saw it. A small shape on the side of the road. Still. Too still. As the fog parted, it revealed a girl, barefoot. Her clothes were torn, hanging off her like damp paper. Her head tilted downward, her hair covering her face. Ethan's pulse jumped. He rolled down his window, leaning toward the glass, but before he could even say a word, the girl's head snapped upward. Her face was gray. Her eyes were holes, not empty, but deep, like looking down into a well. And then she was gone. No sound, no movement, just gone. The fog closed around him again. Ethan hit the brakes, heart hammering. The truck's headlights flickered, dimmed, then steadied. For a long moment, he just sat there, breathing hard. He told himself he was tired. He'd imagined it. But the road ahead didn't look familiar anymore. He started driving again, slow, cautious, but within minutes he realized something was wrong. He'd already seen that stretch of road, the same bend, the same slope, the same jagged boulder leaning out from the right-hand side. He glanced at the GPS, frozen. Same location, same coordinates. The digital clock on the dashboard wasn't moving either. He tapped the screen. Nothing. The silence pressed harder against his chest. He kept driving. He didn't know how long, minutes, hours, maybe days. Every turn brought him back to the same cursed curve. And then she was there again. The girl. Same place, same torn dress. This time she was smiling. It wasn't a human smile. It was too wide, too deliberate. Her head tilted, her eyes reflecting the headlights like glass. Ethan's hands trembled. He slammed on the gas. The truck roared forward, but over the engine he heard something. Footsteps. Soft, wet, running beside the truck, keeping pace no matter how fast he drove. He didn't look. He couldn't. When he finally slowed, another figure appeared ahead. A man this time, walking down the shoulder of the road. Thin, white robe fluttering in the fog. Ethan almost cried from relief. A living person, someone real. But as the headlights caught the man's face, that relief turned to ice. The man's eyes were gone, black sockets leaking dark streaks down his cheeks. His mouth stretched open, too far, revealing a grin that split his face in two. Ethan screamed and hit the accelerator again. The fog thickened. The road kept looping. The sky never changed. He began to notice shapes in the fog, faces pressed against the glass of his cab, fading whenever he looked. He could hear whispers through the static of the radio, voices calling his name in tones that weren't quite human. He drove until his gas was almost gone. His mind felt broken, fractured, like the fog had seeped inside him. And then, one last time, she appeared, in the center of the road, closer than before. Her head tilted, eyes hollow, smile stretched wide enough to tear skin. Ethan's scream echoed through the cab as he jerked the wheel. Metal crunched, glass shattered. The world went black. At dawn, a passing driver spotted the wreck. The semi crushed against a rock wall, headlights still burning through the fog. Ethan was barely alive. When he woke in the hospital 2 days later, his hair had turned almost white. His hands shook uncontrollably. He tried to explain the fog, the loop, the faces, but the doctors told him it was shock, hallucination, oxygen loss. He never believed that. He stopped driving, barely slept. Neighbors said they'd hear him screaming at night, swearing the sound of footsteps ran past his window, whispering from the fog outside. Less than a year later, Ethan Parker was found dead in his bed. Heart failure, they said, but the paramedics who arrived first swore the air in his apartment was freezing and that the smell of salt hung faintly in the room. Some said the road wraith had followed him home. Others said he'd never really escaped it at all. So if you ever find yourself driving a fog-covered highway after midnight and the world feels wrong, like it's folding in on itself, don't stop, don't slow down, and don't look into the fog. Because once the road wraith sees you, you don't drive through the road anymore. You drive inside it.